When you work in Excel, you may find from time to time that while you've created your spreadsheet and it's looking pretty good, you've got all your formulas working correctly and whatnot, you may run out of time to do some really nice formatting. And one of the ways that you may decide to really make your spreadsheet more user-friendly and to implement some styles is to go to Excel's Cell Styles. Now, there are several different kinds of styles, and so we'll take a look at each one, but hopefully these styles will help you not have to reinvent the wheel every time you create a spreadsheet. Hi, I'm Terry, one of the Consumer Technology Specialists for Mid-Continent Public Library, and let's investigate Excel and Cell Styles. As I look at our first example today, I can see that what I'm trying to do is some way of tracking my steps during the day. And I also see over here on the right that I should be taking a minimum of 3,000 steps, but my goal really should be closer to 10,000 steps. So I've tried to keep track of my steps during the week, and I see that, well, I've done better some days than other days. So I'd like to format the cells where I've done well and where I've not done so well to track. And maybe there's a certain day that I tend to get farther away from my goal than, say, other days. Or maybe there are some days when I really meet my goal. And why do I think that is? So as I look here, I see that in B5, I only did 2,500 steps. Well, I certainly want to pull that out and see what's going on with that day if I can. And to do that, what I want to do is go to the Styles group that is here in my ribbon on the Home tab. And the Styles group can be found just to the right of Middle. And the third button here is called Cell Styles. And Cell Styles is where we want to go to make our changes to our formatting. So I'm going to click the drop down here. And the very first choice, the very first grouping is good, bad, and neutral. So we said that B5 with those 2,500 steps is really bad. So I could click bad and see how it just automatically formatted that. Now, this tends to be more of a one cell kind of thing, although I could select multiple cells if I wanted to. So let's see, where else? Oh, well, this 3,500 on Friday in F4 might be another place where I would say, I need to go to Cell Styles, and I'm going to say that is bad as well. Now, I could select multiple cells, as we said. So I could select here in E4, and then I'm going to hold down my control key as I also select E5, because those are really good days. And I can come over to Cell Styles and say, yep, those are really good days. Now, it would depend on the data that I'm trying to really bring out when I look at this spreadsheet, whether I would actually go for this other choice. So again, Cell Styles. Do I really care about neutral? Well, not in this case. But I can see very easily that the kind of red background is bad and the green background is good. And that really helps me figure out where my good days are and where my bad days are and where I really want to concentrate more to meet my goal. As we look at this next example, it's a weekly schedule for a really small company of some kind. It only has, as we can see here, 4 employees, and none of them are actually full-time. Their hourly rate is here in column B, and then their gross salary for the week is here in column I. In I8, we have the total of those salaries. But let's say that this is kind of our first attempt at this spreadsheet, so we want to mark some of the cells so that we can come back and double check and make sure that what we are doing is accurate. So first of all, in I4, we have the cell, we have the formula that all of these cells that calculate the pay for that week for each employee will be using that same formula. I want to be sure to double check that formula. So I'm going to go up to Cell Styles, and in Data and Model, I'm going to say, you know what, this is a calculation, and we can see that the text has turned orange and bold, and then we kind of have a light brown background and even a border around that cell. And it took me just one click to do that. Well, if I'm going to make sure that my total for the week is correct, I also want to come down to I8 and double check it. So I'm going to go back to Cell Styles and select Check Cell because I want to be sure this is absolutely correct. So in this case, as I look at it, it has a darker border and it has a darker brown background behind it, and it's even changed that font to bold and white. In fact, sadly, as I come back and look at I4, I can see that it is only adding up the hours for the employees from C4 through G4. So I want to fix that and go with H4. But it's a great reminder that that is what needs to happen. Now, as I find my fill handle in the lower right of that cell and click and drag down with the fill handle, it fixes all of those calculations, but it also changed the formatting to show that each one of those cells is a calculated cell. Well, let's see what other kind of formats we could add. So as we go to Cell Styles, we have explanatory text. In J4, I could even type something like add hours worked for Monday through Saturday, and then multiply by hourly rate. And that looks pretty good, but if I go to my Cell Styles and select explanatory text, it changes that text to kind of a dark gray, and it italicized it. And it's just one click. So it helps me see that this is something that I do want to check as I go through. Now let's see what else we have here. We also have a linked cell. It could be that I've decided that when I have this total, and I've even maybe written a formula below here that double checks how I get the total payroll number. But for right now, I'm just going to say that it equals I8. But this cell is going to be linked to a summary sheet that shows the totals for each week, so that I don't have to click on each sheet tab for each week to see what's going on. I just get a summary sheet with all this information. So I want to be sure that I mark that in some way. So with Cell Styles, I'll just say, you know what, this is a linked cell, and now I know to watch for that and to watch for how it relates to that other summary sheet and to make sure that the links are working properly. Well, let's look at Cell Styles again because we also have a note. Let's say that I decide over here that in B11 I'm going to write a note that says we may need another employee by March. Because that is kind of important and we want to not forget our thought, we'll go back to Cell Styles and say, this is a note. Now the only thing is, when I only select the first cell, it only really puts the yellow background on that first cell. So I'm going to select all of the text, and we'll come back with Cell Styles and go with Note. Now the next possibility here in that group is warning text. The warning text could just simply be that this is a double check of hours worked and hourly rate. And we need to be sure that that is just absolutely accurate. So to remind us, we will come back to our data and model and select warning text. Most of my time here has been spent typing or thinking about these cells. It has not been the formatting, and the formatting is very easy to do, so it helps speed up my process. As we look at this new example, we can easily see that it is a profit and loss statement, and while we've put in the headings and even plugged in some numbers, it's just very plain. It's not even all that easy to read. But if we were to change the fonts here and there, it might make a real difference in how easily read this particular document would be. So what we can do is click, say where it says profit and loss statement in A1, and then we can go to our cell styles and click on the drop down. And the third category of formatting that we can do is titles and headings. And so we have 4 different headings that we can apply, or for title we could select title. And just that fast, I don't have to worry about changing the font or the point size or the color of the font. That's all done for me just by going to title and clicking. Well, let's also look at income and expenses, because I feel like those 2 items are headings of some kind. So I'm going to select those 2, and then I'm going to go back to cell styles, and I think I'm going to go with heading 1 for those. And notice that they even, when I click off of them, besides having a darker kind of font and a larger font than what we started with, they also have a blue underline. When I click on the word profit, I want to think about this a little bit. I'm going to click on cell styles because I think maybe that just needs to be bold but with no underline. However, the total, I think I'm going to click on it and then go back to cell styles, and I'm going to go with this total kind of formatting that is pretty standard really with accounting, where I have a single line above the total and a double line below the total, and I can click that. So now my profit is standing out a little bit more. Personally, I would go back in and add in a $sign here for the profit, and probably for the rest of those numbers I would come in and do something like add in commas so that everything just lines up much nicer. But this was so easy to do, and I didn't really have to think about it because everything was made for me. For our next example, we're looking at a very small classroom of 4 people, and we have collected daily scores for several days, and then in column K there was a test. And I've decided that I would like to make this a little more readable and a little less numeric data. So starting in A1, and gosh, now that I know how to use styles, this was going to be so easy. So in A1, I'm going to go to Cell Styles. This is a title, so I'm going to go to the title, and just that fast. I have a large font, I've got gray, I have this wonderful change in how that looks, and it was 1 click. Well, let's come down then to A3 and B3, where we have essentially the main column heading type of information with name and daily scores. Well, let's again go to Cell Styles, and this really is heading 1, and we'll click on that. Now the only thing about that is, as I click off of it, notice that while name is underlined and it fills out that whole cell, daily scores. Now, when it was its original size, it was within one cell and it kind of made sense. But now that we have a larger font, the underline doesn't follow through and follow with the word scores. So I do need to go back and select daily scores and then go to cell styles and heading 1 to make sure that that underline carries through for both of my column headings, name and daily scores. Now below that we have subcategories, which are all the daily scores, and I already don't like how close those dates are to my heading styles, so I'm going to widen out and bring down row 4 so that there's just a little more visual space here between the column headings and then the daily score headings. Well, then I'm going to select those daily score headings, and we'll go back to cell styles, and this time I think we'll go with heading 3. I still get an underline for it and bold text, so it still sets them apart quite nicely as I look at my data. As I look at these scores, it could be that I want to highlight, either for myself or for someone else who's reading this spreadsheet, some of the information that I think is important. And let's start with the test. And so what we can do is highlight this column by going to Cell Styles and clicking on the drop-down. And then we can go below the titles and headings to the themed cell styles. Now when we look here, we can see that there's a blue, and then there's, well, depends on the monitor you have. You might see it as orange or maybe rust. To the right of that we have gray, to the right of that is gold, and then another blue, and then a green. And notice that each of these accent colors has different intensities. So, for example, with the green, I could go with 20%, which is a lighter green than, say, the 40% or the 60%, or then accent 6, which is the darkest. So let's in fact do that. Let's do 20% just to show that this is the column with the test scores. And then I want to highlight, the 90% with a really dark color. So I'm going to go to Cell Styles and come down to Accent 6 with the really dark green. But then I also want to show that 86 and the 88, and I'm going to use the Control key to select the two cells. Come back to Cell Styles. So I'm going to go 40% Accent 6. For our next set of examples, I've just typed in some numbers, and I've put numbers that might have two very similar yet different formats side by side. So, for example, in column A, we have the comma format, and in column B, we have the comma, but in square brackets, the 0 format. And let's compare those. So I'm going to click in A3 where we have 1500, and then we're going to go to Cell Styles, and this time we're going to come down to number format and click on comma. And with the comma format, the first one, we do get a comma for the thousands place, and then we get 2 decimal places. Then I'm going to click in B3 where we have comma and then the 0 in square brackets, go back to Cell Styles and select the comma with a 0. And what that 0 meant was no decimal places. Well, let's try the same thing here with currency, and we're going to suspect that that same rule for the name of the theme with a 0 in square brackets will hold true. So in D3, I'm going to go to Cell Styles and go to Currency, which adds in a $ and again 2 decimal places. And then I'm going to go to E3, go to Cell Styles, and select Currency with the 0 in square brackets. And no, it's just 25, no decimal places. Now let's move over to the last example, which is percent. And this sometimes trips people up. So let's look at it in a little more detail. First of all, right now, it says 0.9. In other words, it's a decimal number that we want to convert to a percent. So when I click on G3, and then I go up to cell styles and go down to percent and click, it says that 9/10, that 0.9, has the percent equivalent of 90%, which is absolutely correct. But what happens sometimes is that depending on how your formulas are written and the kind of data that you are using, and a prime example really is grades, where every grade will be some sort of a whole number like 80, 90, that kind of thing. And when you type 90 as the average, or you calculate 90 as the average because you've only recorded whole numbers, and then you want that 90 to look like 90%, it's not a simple task of putting in a percent sign, but you need to convert the whole number to a decimal first. So in this case, I would go up to the formula bar and put in my equal sign to show that I want to put in a formula, and then I'm going to go to the right of the whole number and divide by 100. Press enter. That gives me the decimal, and then from there I want to go to cell styles and percent, and now that's working correctly. Otherwise, if I just type the 90 and I say, oh, I want to make this a percent, watch what happens. Cell styles, percent, and it says, nope, 9,000%. And I'm sure that your students would certainly appreciate a 9,000%, but of course that's not accurate. So be aware that you must have a decimal and take that decimal and convert it to a percent so that your percent format will work properly. Sometimes when you work with spreadsheets, you are requested to make the title a certain format, make the column headings a certain format, that kind of thing. And then you find that whoever has done this requesting is going to be working with you more than just for one spreadsheet. And so you would like to keep all of that information saved so that you can refer back to it. And it may even be that you find that you have created a format at some point that you really like, and you would like to save that format so that you can take it to other spreadsheets without having to sort of reinvent the wheel. So we're just going to do a simple example. Here we have a new workbook, and this happens to be some sort of a mileage tracker. So I'm going to click in A1, and I'm going to change the font to something, well, more bold. And then I definitely need to change the font size and maybe the font color. That looks kind of like mud on my monitor, so maybe that's a good thing. Now for date and from and to and round trip and miles, first of all I want to center those, and I think I want to make them bold, and let's make it a dark green. I've created these formats, and now I want to save them. So it's a really simple task, actually. I'm going to click in A1 where I have mileage, and I'm going to go to Cell Styles. And then I'm going to come down below Number Format where it says New Cell Style, and I'm going to click. And at the top it says, well, this is Style 1, so I guess I could call it Style 1. I could also call it Mileage. I could give it the name of the font, for example, if I wanted to do that. And then it even has picked up, for example, that the alignment is just general. It has the font and the size and the color. It says, well, there's no borders on that, no fill. But there's a lot that I could do here. If I say, gosh, I would like to add to this a little bit, I can go to this Format button. And it takes me to really the old-fashioned way. So for font, I might decide that instead of 18, I think I want to make it 20. And just to make it even more intriguing, I think I'm going to make it italic. And then to the right of that, we have a border tab. Do I want to put a border around that? I don't think so right now, although, I might put a border here on the left and one on the right. And then for fill, I think I might look for some contrasting color, maybe that light gold that we've looked at today. But we can say, okay. And so now I've changed my format even a little bit more, and then I'm going to say, okay. Now from here, I'm going to go back to Cell Styles, and up at the top, look at that. I now have a custom format that when I click on it, I have that background. And again, it's one of those situations we ran into earlier where because I made the font larger, then the background didn't carry over more than one cell. So let me select both of those cells now and apply my custom style. Wow. Now that was pretty easy. Now let's also look at what we did with date and from and to and round trip. And I'm not going to get fancy with this at all, but I am going to go back to Cell Styles, and I'm going to say, yes, this is a new cell style. Oh, I think though that I am going to go to Format and change the font from 11 point to 12 point. It's still a nice green here, and we'll say okay. And instead of style 1 though, we're going to give it the name of column headings. I'm going to back out and just say column heading 1 and click on OK. So as I go back to Cell Styles and click on the drop down, I have column headings 1 and I have mileage. Now that is just a really nice shortcut so that even within this workbook, I could create another spreadsheet and apply my mileage style or my column heading style. But this is where it gets even better, because if I keep this workbook open and I go back to my original spreadsheet, my original workbook here, and I want to use those styles that I just created in that other workbook, I can, for example, come here with comma and currency and that kind of thing. Then I can go to Cell Styles, and I can say I want to merge styles. And it says, well, where do you want to merge them from? Well, that second workbook that I worked in was Example Workbook 2. So I need to select that. Then click OK. Then I can go back to Cell Styles. Oh my goodness, look at this. And at the top, I have my column headings. And I have now copied my cell styles from one workbook to another workbook. Let's go back to A1 and go to Cell Styles. And now that I've merged them, I can use that mileage style on A1 here. Now again, I need to watch out because this is going to go over more than one cell. But I go to Cell Styles, go to mileage, and I still need to be a little brave here and add in one more. But I've now applied another style, a title style from the second workbook to the first workbook. So this becomes such a time saver, especially if you're required to use the same kind of formatting over and over and over again from workbook to workbook. It's just all built in, and you can customize it so that it works for you. To learn even more, be sure to go to mymcpl.org/online learning for such great resources as Universal Class, Learning Express Library, LinkedIn Learning, and Udemy Business. We also premiere videos every Wednesday and Friday at 1 o'clock. If you miss a video premiere, you'll still be able to find it later when it's convenient for you. You can find us on Facebook at MCPL 360, and you can find us on YouTube by going to our MCPL MO channel.